Aunt Jemima has officially rebranded itself for obvious reasons, right? So the Aunt Jemima label and logo has been offensive and has been pointed out by people who believe it's offensive for years now. And finally, the company gave in and they've decided to rebrand and use a new logo. And the part that like I briefly read about last night, and I was just like, that's a weird decision, was that they went from Aunt Jemima, which is awful, to a weird name, okay? And the weird name is Pearl Milling Company. And I was like, oh wow, that's a catchy one. Like, why did they go with like a lengthy, weird like label like that? And then it turns out that this is actually the original mill built in 1888 that made the original self-rising pancake mix, which I guess is a reason, but like, who cares? Like, go with something better. Like, right? But anyway, so let's take a look at so that's what the new logo looks like. And of course, there's a racist history behind Aunt Jemima. Old Aunt Jemima originated as a song of field slaves that was later performed at minstrel shows. The original Aunt Jemima character was portrayed by Nancy Green, who was born into slavery. Quaker Oats paid Green to travel and promote Aunt Jemima products and costumes. So, I mean, not only was the logo offensive, once you read about the history behind it, it's even more disgusting. And so I, again, agree wholeheartedly with changing the logo and all of that. I just find it weird that they went with Pearl Milling Company. I get the reason, but let's just abandon the reason and go with something better.
This is one of those topics that definitely fascinates me as a first generation Black American, right? Like my parents are immigrants. Both of them. Trust me, they don't have much knowledge of U.S. history as it pertains to the intricacies of how racism sort of, perpetuated itself out of slavery, right? My parents would not have known that Uncle Ben or Aunt Jemima were these racist things that come from a deep historic past. So like, since my parents wouldn't have known, and I'm around nothing but first generation kids my whole life, I didn't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had Aunt Jemima in my house all the time and didn't realize what the concept of a mammy was, right? Like the concept of minstrel shows, the concept of blackface, the concept of the invention of American entertainment being these basically racist ass tropes, right? Like, it's not something that I knew. To the point, Anna, where the first time I realized that people were pissed about blackface, I was like, I mean, yeah, these white people look stupid, but I didn't understand the history of blackface. I swear to God, like I had to learn that. As an adult, it's not like this is what you get taught in schools, right? I remember one teacher in English class saying this. He was like, there is no form of American music that was not invented by Black people. This is a white guy.
That's true, yeah.
And I was like, damn, really? Jazz? Yeah. The blues? Yeah. Country? Yeah. Go on, and bluegrass, go on, folk, go on. It doesn't matter, gospel, it doesn't matter. Was invented by Black people. But again, if you're a Black American, this is stuff that's in your household. It's part of your history. So you know this intrinsically. So this Aunt Jemima story, I'm sure hits me differently than it does somebody who is a Black American whose parents, whose great-grandfather was born on this American soil, right? So, I feel ill-equipped a lot of times to talk about this stuff because some of the history of Blackness in this country, a lot of it is inherited from me. It's not something that I'm of, right? Like my family came from Haiti, which of course has its own history. My ancestors did not get to Haiti voluntarily, y'all. Okay, but yes, they did have the first successful slave revolt and overthrowing of a colonial nation in 1804 for sure, and we're still dealing with the repercussions and consequences of that to this day, as still being the poorest country, in the Western Hemisphere. But still, a lot of this history, like I said, is inherited. So I receive it a lot differently than I would assume a Black American would.
Yeah, I mean, I think that making these changes is important. I think part of what I worry about, though, is sometimes there's so much pressure and emphasis on, the somewhat easy fixes. And I worry that this is the kind of stuff that gets amplified as, look, things are changing, when in reality, like the systemic issues that we're currently experiencing right now don't seem to change.
And again, it's important for people to realize these systemic issues. What people need to understand about racism is that it's a tool in order to reinforce these same things that are ruining all of our lives, right? Like the reason why you get the Irish immigrants, to be against the blacks is so that you can get them distracted on black people to keep them subjugated in a way that you already want to do that, right? Like racism has just always been a tool to reinforce these horrible systems that we all hate. Like it's important for everybody to understand the point of mammy, the point of blackface is to keep people like, remember those, like, yeah, your life isn't great, but just remember, you're better than these Negroes. And here, let's laugh at them right now. Right? Like it's always been that. It's always been that. It's always been to get, the sort of not even the little overseer of the property who is the poorest white man in society to understand that your lot in life is terrible, but it's not that of the slave, right? Because they would never want that overseer to understand his commonality with the slave. Because then, hold on, the masters and the ruling class are going to be in trouble. So it's important for people to understand the history and why these things get perpetuated.
You're so right. So I was reading about the Reconstruction era for an interview that we did for Weekends. And it was actually, there's a lot that I think obviously doesn't get taught in school, for instance. And one thing that really stood out to me was how the KKK, after the Civil War, after and during Reconstruction, really made this concerted effort to appeal to poor whites in America, right? Poor whites who actually had far more in common with black people in this country than they had in common with slave owners, right? Mm-hmm. But to your point, it wasn't that difficult for the KKK to get poor whites to join them. And it wasn't simply because they pointed to skin color. What they did was essentially communicate to them, yeah, your situation sucks and you don't have the money or the wealth to be a slave owner and we don't really have much in common, but imagine how awful things would be if black slaves were equal to you, right?
That's it. That's it. Yes, your life is horrible, but the damn Yanks want to turn you into a slave. That's it. The message is very simple, and
And by the way, they did turn you into a slave. I mean, it's not
100%, 100%. And what people don't realize a lot about, like, it's not how we tell ourselves the story of how we ended slavery. It's just that the industrialists were just like, look, man, that what y'all trying to do is outmoded, outdated, inefficient, gonna cause revolts. It's like, we're done with that. We got this new thing. It's called capitalism. You're gonna love it. Yep. And yes, the industrialists, the capitalists are the reason why we started the Civil War, because they wanted to spread capitalism throughout the entire nation. It's like, no, we're not gonna have some slave state next to our capitalist state. No, we're doing this now. And that's just what it is. And let's face it, yes, capitalism is better than slavery. Well, so they were right about that one.
Yes, of course. But again, I mean, I think it's important for people to understand and really do a deep dive into this nation's history, because that era, the Reconstruction, I think is commonly thought of as like this linear process to progress, and that was not the case. And when you understand the thought process behind indentured servitude, right, which followed slavery. I think you can have a better understanding of the argument that we're making right now, right? This idea that you're indebted, like you work for the rest of your life for the industrialists, and I know it doesn't matter if you're black or white, you're poor in this country. You are loaded up on debt. You are working your tail off to pay that debt back. And more often than not, Americans are unable to pay back that debt by the time they die. That's the reality of the situation for so many people.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.